Hello students, welcome to Infinity IAS. Today we will look at a very important topic for prelims examination. Every year we see there are questions asked either about space or some space technology such as launch vehicles or satellites directly in the examination. So we hear about technologies like PSLV or GSLV in space technology. What is PSLV? It is Polar Satellite Launching Vehicle. What is GSLV? It is Geosynchronous Satellite Launching Vehicle. So, such terms are constantly used when it comes to space technology. But to understand these terms, we need to go into the concepts of different types of orbits. So, we'll first start with what is an orbit. An orbit is a regular repeating path that an object in space takes around another one. For example, this is Earth. We see satellites going around the Earth in a circular path and a repeating path. For example, even Moon, which is a satellite of Earth, goes around the Earth in a circular path and a repeating path. So, orbit, we understand orbit is the path that is taken by satellites or any bodies that revolve around Earth or other heavenly bodies in the space. So, we can classify orbits according to the distance from the Earth. For example, this is Earth and we have Moon orbiting it at a certain distance. But at the same time, we have many satellites that orbit Earth. It need not be as far as the Moon. It can be very closer to the Earth's surface. So, there is a difference between the distance taken by different objects in the space that revolve around Earth. So, these two orbits cannot be the same. So, we classify orbits depending on the distance from the Earth. They are classified as high Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, and low Earth orbit. We will look into these different types of orbits in the coming session. We'll start with high Earth orbits. High Earth orbits are where satellites reach around 42,164 kilometers from the center of the Earth. That is 36,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. What does this mean? So, this is the Earth. This is the center of the Earth and this is the surface of the Earth. So, if a satellite is revolving around Earth at a distance of 42,000 kilometers from the center or around 36 kilometers from the surface of the Earth, it is said to be taking a high Earth orbit. So, here when the satellite orbital velocity matches that of the Earth in a high Earth orbit, it is called geosynchronous orbit. What is a geosynchronous orbit? It basically means it is synchronized with Earth's revolution or rotation. So, what is a geosynchronous orbit? It basically means that the rotation of the Earth and the revolution of the satellite is synchronized. That means the satellite takes around 24 hours to go around the Earth. So, it is always directly over the same place on the Earth's surface. So, if we see Earth is like this and a satellite is directly around some point on the Earth. So, if it is taking the same amount of time to revolve around the Earth just like the Earth's rotation, so it will stay at the same point on the Earth. So, what can this be used for? Geosynchronous orbit satellites can be used to observe one single point of Earth throughout its rotation. So, this can be used particularly for weather satellites. So for example, a weather satellite is there in a geosynchronous orbit. It can look at the same point on Earth, for example, India. So that satellite can observe India atmosphere, at the atmosphere over India throughout the 24 hours, and can transmit reliable data about the weather over that particular region, that is India. So weather satellites can be there in high Earth orbits. Then comes medium Earth orbit. So medium Earth orbit is a little bit lower than the higher Earth orbit. So as the satellite moves from higher to middle to lower, the speed of the satellite increases. So the speed of the satellite near to the Earth is the highest. So when it comes to prelims examination, we need to know that the speed of the satellite in high Earth orbit is the lowest and low Earth orbit is the highest. So the speed of satellite increases as its distance from the Earth decreases. So now we have seen that in high Earth orbit, in a geosynchronous orbit, the satellite takes exactly 24 hours to revolve around the Earth. When it comes to medium Earth orbit, there is an orbit called semi-synchronous orbit. This takes 12 hours to complete one revolution. So if we see here, the satellite passes over the same spot twice in a day. In geosynchronous orbit, we have seen that the satellite stays over the same spot throughout the day. In semi-synchronous orbit, the satellite passes twice over this spot. So when the Earth is rotating and the satellite completes 2 revolutions, so it passes over this spot twice in a day. It is very important that global positioning system satellites are located in this orbit. That is, the GPS which we use for navigation, these satellites are situated in semi-synchronous orbit. Next comes low Earth orbits. These are very important when it comes to human space technology. Low Earth orbits are the lowest when compared to all the other two types of orbits, and the speed of the satellites is the highest in this orbit. So there are scientific satellites as well as weather satellites going on around in the low Earth orbit. Polar orbits are a kind of low Earth orbits. That means the satellite goes over the poles of the Earth. It takes approximately 99 minutes for the satellites to make one revolution around the Earth. So what are the satellites that go in the polar orbits? Those are scientific satellites and weather satellites that are released in the polar orbits. Now if we see, India has a very strong PSLV technology with ISRO. So we have many successful launches with PSLV with ISRO. But our GSLV technology is not as good. It is still under development and we constantly use French Space Center for launching our geosynchronous satellites. Why is that so? So we have seen that polar synchronous orbits are closest to the Earth and geosynchronous orbits are the farthest from Earth. So if we see, that is the reason attaining geosynchronous launch vehicle technology is very critical and one of the most difficult tasks for any space agency. So now there is also one more important object that is in the lower Earth orbit, that is International Space Station. The International Space Station is also in the lower Earth orbit and it is very important when it comes to prelims examination. So we will see how polar synchronous orbits operate. We have already seen that polar synchronous orbits is where satellite goes around the poles of the Earth. So here if we see, the satellite goes like this, goes over the North Pole, comes from down South Pole, and then during the second revolution it again goes and comes, and then this way during the third orbit or the third revolution it will slowly shift from one longitude to the other longitude. This way the polar synchronous orbit satellites cover the entire surface of the Earth during its multiple revolutions. So this way polar synchronous satellites can be used to look at the entire surface of the Earth or the atmosphere all over the Earth's surface in its path. In the next video, we will look at the differences between polar synchronous, geosynchronous and geostationary orbits in a detailed way for the prelims examination. Thank you, students.